Good afternoon, Council. It has been a while, hasn't it, since you last joined us back in February. The spring has come, fake spring also came, and then winter kind of came back, and now we're almost into summer. I know it's going to be hot next week, so really looking forward to what weather Canada has for us next. Welcome to the M365 Council, of course, hosted by Orangutech. My name's Eric. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Marketing here at Orangutech. We have with you today the Q2 Council Meeting, the panel discussion. As you can see sort of down at the bottom there, we have a sort of a timeline played out. This is the panel discussion Q2. So who is Orangutech? Why are we hosting this? Why does it matter? Orangutech is a Microsoft Solutions partner for modern work. We are no longer a gold, silver, bronze, legacy partner. We are now all up to date with our solutions partner designation. So we are a Microsoft Solutions partner for modern work, dealing primarily with the Canadian federal government. We sponsor a variety of events, some that are business oriented, like the Public Sector Network, SharePoint Saturday, which I'm sure you've been able to attend, and also DPI, which we just had a very successful PDW. Was that 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago. Very successful event that that we really enjoy sponsoring and that we look up to. We also sponsor the Canada Army Run, the Humane Society, and Code Youth in our community. So making sure that we're in our community, building up Ottawa, not only from a business standpoint, but from a community standpoint as well. The M365 Council mission statement. What are we doing here with this council? We aim to create a community for our members to share M365 challenges, successes, insights, and next steps among public sector departments. We're all using M365 to varying degrees, and this is an opportunity for us to share those experiences, learn lessons from each other, and just overall build a community around something that's so integral to how we do business. I would also like to call out our next big event, which is in September. It is the M365 Council Showcase. It will be in person at the Westin here in Ottawa. Invitations are expected to go out within the next few weeks. We have confirmed Lisa Carroll will be speaking and Jason Bromett will be speaking. Lisa being the General Manager for the Public Sector for Microsoft Canada, and Jason Bromett being the Head of Modern Work for Microsoft North America. So two big leads joining us from Microsoft. We also intend to have panel and a motivational speaker as well. So a really nice collection of speakers to bring you through the day. And it's the first time we've ever done it. We're really excited. And the planning stages, of course, are fast and furious right now. For anyone who runs events, you know what it's like. So before we get to our panel, if you do have questions, please submit the questions through the Teams live chat. The Q&A is on, it is live, it is moderated by myself as well. Please identify yourself when asking questions if you're comfortable. Vote for questions you wish to see answered, and there is Q&A. The Q&A actually today will be in the middle. We will be doing the Q&A after a few questions, and then we'll do Q&A. We want to prioritize the questions from the community, and so please don't hold on to your questions. Get them in there, answer them, or get them asked, and we will do our best to answer them. Please refrain from calling out specific software or specific things, and calling out specific situations. We're trying to look big picture here on the software side, so we don't want to really call anything out specifically, other than, of course, M365, which is why we're all here. So without further ado, I would like to toss it to Orangutech President, Lachlan Henderson, who will be your panel moderator for the remainder of the session. Lachlan, take it away.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be here as the panel moderator. I have been with Orangutech going on 12 years now. It'll be my 12th year later on this year. And this is actually the first time that I've been able to attend and join a M365 Council meeting. and we've hosted them for many years now. So this is actually very exciting to me. And the topic is actually very near and dear to my heart because over the 11 years that I've been with Orangutech, I have been involved and responsible for bringing technology, third-party technology to the Canadian market, to the public sector, and solving some of those challenges that departments face as they kind of look at their environments and do a gap analysis of what their needs are within their current technology landscape. So this topic is very near and dear to me. I'm very, very passionate about third-party tools. I'm passionate about the M365 ecosystem and what Microsoft has offered in their functionality out of the box for departments to take advantage of. I'm super excited to be able to moderate this panel discussion. We have two excellent speakers here with us today. The first one I'm happy to introduce is the Executive Director for Enterprise Information Management at ESDC, Alex Singh. Alex Singh joins us from his little rural piece of paradise out in the Gatineau Hills. So he is joining us remotely. And he comes with a wealth of information and background and technology experience. Prior to joining the public sector, Alex actually worked at consulting agencies such as Accenture. He worked at Research in Motion, for those of you obviously that know that organization, and Mitel Networks, again, another one that a lot of us will know. He has over 25 years of experience in IT, both in the public and private sector. Joining the public sector, he joined Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat in 2011 to work on the Government of Canada's first ever SaaS EDRMS solution, the one, the only GC Docs. I'm sure we all know it and we all know it well. After TBS, he moved over to the PCO, the Privy Council Office, where he provided project management oversight for IT projects and the Prime Minister's websites. Those were all done by Alex's team when he was there at the PCO. From there, he moved over to his role at ESDC, first starting out as the Director of Enterprise Architecture before moving into his new role as the Executive Director of Enterprise Information Management. And we'll get more into that on some of the projects and challenges, obviously, that Alex has faced in his time at ESDC. But firstly, I really do want to thank you, Alex, for joining this panel. I know it is challenging with everything on the go, the projects that you have within your portfolio, to carve out a little bit of time. And I'm very, very thankful that you're able to join us and share some of those lessons learned that you have overcome in your journey to M365 within the ESDC department. So thank you for having me. The next panel member that we have here is Evie. Evie is joining us from the RCMP, where he is a business analyst and developer. He is joining us remotely as well, working from home as opposed to in the office. Evie's career really lasted the last several years, focused on supporting people, teams throughout the development of technical solutions within the RCMP. He currently occupies the role of federal policing technical lead at the RCMP, specializing in various integral areas such as programming, development, managing projects, designing data architectures, and breaking down capabilities of on-prem solutions, as well as new cloud technologies as the department looks to modernize and move into the M365 ecosystem. Evie comes with us with a wide skill set and experiences across a multitude of different technological areas, including obviously business analysts, intelligence, data architectures, information management, policy management, and application development and back-end installations. So again, Evie, welcome. Thank you so much. For those of you that don't know, Evie and I actually go quite a ways back to pre-COVID, when Orangutech used to host working sessions around process automation and different third-party tools, and Evie was a member of that community and would come out and share insights and share solutions that the RCMP had developed over the years focused on workflow automation and process automation. So I'm really, really happy that Evie was able to join us here. and share some of that insight, share some of that knowledge and things that the RCMP has done over the past couple of years. So again, Evie, thank you so much for being here. So why don't we jump right into the questions that we have? We have a few key questions that we really wanted to tackle first before we get into all of your questions that I'm sure you guys are asking in the Q&A channel. The very first question, I'm going to kind of direct it to Alex, your time at ESDC. For those of you, obviously, that don't know, ESDC is in the midst of a major digital transformation initiative. They're moving to the cloud. They're moving to M365. I'm sure a lot of departments are, if not all of you are, in some way or shape or form moving into the cloud, taking advantage of M365 or other cloud-based technologies. And Alex, in your department, in your role as executive director, what sort of factors were you looking at when you were looking at the broader landscape of M365, of cloud technologies, and the gaps inherent within them, and how were you looking to solve for those gaps either through third-party tools or in other means?
So good question. I think I need to maybe just set it up with a little bit of background of our department. So just for the audience here, is like our department, ESDC, has 40,000 employees across Canada. We have some of the largest social benefit programs, so employment insurance, Canadian pension plan, old age security, plus a whole bunch of other programs such as student loans, a lot of programs related to disability for employers, and another even systems that go to doing like a job search, like Job Bank. So ESDC is quite an old department, if I can put it that way, in the sense that we leverage mainframes still in certain aspects of our function. So there's a lot of history. And I think to your question, the department went through many phases in IT, which brought us to this question of third-party tools. Like, we had so many custom apps that were built when that was the, kind of the way to go in the 90s. And what we learned quickly from those is that they stick around for a long time. And you eventually get to a point where there's a question around build versus buy, and hence the third-party tool. So from our perspective as the department, I'll have to answer it in a kind of wearing two different hats. My first one being more of the technology IT hat, but also from an IM perspective. So if I look at it from a technical perspective, like, we found that when we have technologies like SharePoint Online or M365, it opened up a whole bunch of opportunities for our employees, seeing tools and things they could do that they couldn't do in the past, or were much more complex to required IT. So it did open up some interesting opportunities for them, but also made it difficult for us to have a more controlled approach when you have so many employees with so many branches in many different regions. So having a cloud-based environment was great, but it also came along with some challenges from things we weren't used to, like, where's our dev tenant? How do we test stuff? The citizens, or not, sorry, the employees are trying to provide services to citizens, and they're going at it in a production environment. So it did cause a lot of disruptions. And this is where we started seeing that one of the major factors is, how do we provide governance or control around these platforms like M365? They do come with some, but many of it was either found to be lacking when you start getting to the scale of our department. You have 100 SharePoint sites, not too bad to manage. You have 14,000, it's a little harder to manage. So this is where we were starting to look at third-party solutions to help with tasks such as governance around the life cycles of SharePoint, Teams, and so forth. And even in those, maintaining the visibility of these, like how many are redundant, all of these things were stuff that we'd have to somehow code ourselves or create our own reports make sure that these reports catch all these different conditions, but it becomes such a burden, not a burden, such a large task with so much variability that if third-party tools can address that, it saves us, I'll say, effort to focus on the tools that are citizen-facing and less on the ones that are for M365, which are more at this point in time for us used as a back office tool for providing our internal administration. So mechanisms like finding out metadata and adding new content, making sure tools are able to find documents, preventing the sprawl. This is where for us, the gap in M365 made us really start to look at a third-party tool. We did consider build versus buy. What we started to remember, I'll say, from our past is that it's easy to start off, but eventually there's certain aspects that you wish you didn't have to worry about. I'll pick the easiest ones: bilingualism, multilingualism. Having that functionality embedded in everything you build and gets a little more complex. Get a third-party tool that has that pre-built that supports the multilingual, even better. Accessibility for those of you who may not know, one of our ministers is responsible for the employment of disabled persons. She is a disabled person. And so you can imagine that she wants to be able to leverage the services of our department for herself. So accessibility is a strong thing. And she wants to be able to leverage it whether she's coming as a citizen or using it internally. Getting a third-party tool that has these certifications already, a lot of headaches removed for us. So in evaluating these third-party tools, we have these types of considerations that are about usability. And this is where kind of I'll start putting on my IM hat on. What we found is that the usability aspect of out-of-the-box platforms like M365 goes to a certain extent, and then kind of unfortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, opens up too many doors. So now anybody can create a form. Now anybody can create a workflow. How do you ensure consistency across 30,000 employees on how forms are seen, how data is presented to them, how workflows work? It now then becomes, from an IT organization, a very big, I'll say, cumbersome thing to handle. But from an information management perspective, we now have people creating information right, left, and center without any governance around it. So automation, from an IM perspective, had two things. One is putting some strong guidelines around how our tenant was being used, but it also afforded us with certain tools that have great user interfaces that make it interesting and attractive for users to use. So we have a challenge with attachments being used in our department. Well, we were able to get third-party tools that already had a slick interface that had been, probably UX tested quite extensively, versus us having to do that internally and maybe only getting a perspective of a small audience of our department of, well, these people like to work this way, but oops, you didn't catch that the rest of the 90% don't work that way. So from an information management perspective, these were great things that we were able to bring tools that had an easy use. And also post-COVID, most people, as you said, Lachlan, I was there in the early days of GC Docs, and those became a thing of the past with M365. A lot of institutions pivoted. Why? Because it was so nice to use, right? It made it easy for people to use. So getting third-party tools that support that from an IM perspective, make the IM happen in the background without us having to code a whole bunch of things, being able to streamline processes, was a big factor in choosing third-party in tools. And basically because the out-of-the-box gets you to a certain point, but eventually we're getting into niche areas that large companies don't necessarily have time to invest, but third-party organizations that are smaller, nimbler companies are willing to invest and can be very useful for us.
Thanks, Alex. So it sounds like you really kind of looked at it from a couple different facets of viewpoints into the department. Obviously, ESDC, as you said, you're I'm going to use the term dinosaur of the public sector. I mean, you go far, far back. ESDC has had many different names over the years, and you use some very old technology, and you have some very old ways of doing things. And as you move into the cloud, as you move into this new digital age, it sounds like the department is actually having this cultural mind shift of looking at how they support internally as well as externally. Maybe we don't do custom applications. Maybe we use out of the box functionality up to a certain point. It gets us 80% of the way there. And that last 20%, from a usability perspective or accessibility or bilingualism or whatever it is, instead of custom developing it like we used to do, because then I would assume you guys have to support it, maintain it, continually update it. And when you're in the cloud, we no longer own that infrastructure, right? You no longer own that SharePoint environment where you can choose to deploy that service patch or hold it back until Microsoft, fixes all the bugs in it. In M365, they're rolling it out right away. So you're shifting that burden, by the sounds of it. You're shifting that custom development support burden external to your department and leveraging external vendors. I love the idea of using those kind of smaller, nimble organizations that are able to support you and provide you those technologies where major conglomerates, the Microsofts of the world, they don't have that view into that small subset, that small need that you have within ESDC. So thank you so much. That's an excellent response, and I love that. Evie, I'm going to just quickly pass it. Do you have anything to add from your perspective around, how the department at RCMP looks at third-party tools, and what are some of the factors at play over there? Because much like ESDC being a large organization with a lot of complexity, RCMP has its own complexities. You're also a very large organization, but a unique one at that. So I don't know, do you have anything to add from what Alex said, or is that really resonating with you as well?
I think that sums it up pretty well, especially touching upon the bilingual requirements and also the accessibility portion of it, and kind of what maintenance may go into building certain solutions, and which areas might be like a small requirement, but the maintenance on that would require, let's say, teams, considering the tool needs to be updated in the future, and from a security perspective, from a functionality perspective, and it needs to stay up to date with modern methodologies.
Of course, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Evie. Well, I'm going to keep with you on the line. We'll go over to your question because you have a very interesting perspective in things, obviously, because as I said, RCMP is a major department and it has its own personal challenges. If you think about the mandate that RCMP has and kind of the different classes of resources and security components that you guys have to meet given what the RCMP does. So for your question, how do you evaluate whether a tool meets those needs? As I said, RCMP has some of those unique challenges, less security. What are you guys doing to review those tools and identify the ones that actually meet those needs? We all think if you're a third-party organization, we have the best tool, we have the best tech, we have the best way of doing things. How does the RCMP kind of weed out all the wannabe technology stacks and identify the one that's really going to deliver on your need as an organization? How do you do that best fit analysis?
So a bit of a background on my end. So I work for federal policing, which is one of the business lines for the RCMP. So I guess I can speak around that area, but it is a fairly, we call them business lines. There's about 4 in the RCMP, so they all have different functions. Federal policing is mainly focused on the more investigative aspects, whether that's serious organized crime or kind of more those sort of types of crimes. I guess the closest it really is to compare it is like the FBI in the US. I guess that's really the equivalent, if that's a fair comparison at all, but yeah. It's something similar. So yeah, from our end in the beginning, it's really important that we focus purely on the needs and requirements of what the business needs, like what the solution will, what the ideal solution would be. We don't like looking at technologies in the beginning because sometimes they can be limited, although it can be inspiring in certain, like it can inspire people to better understand their needs sometimes, looking at examples. In the beginning, however, we try and understand what the ideal system will be without any limitations of kind of what we currently have, because that allows us to sort of understand what the ideal solution for, let's say, a business process is. And we are very business focused. And then we're very business focused, and we do deal with operational and administrative units. So that's sort of like kind of what we initially look at, and we call it the business requirements, and we go through those to understand what the solution needs to be, what are priority requirements, what are nice to haves. And then after that, we kind of take a look at user requirements. Of course, even if you do a great job on the business requirements end, there are up-to-date methodologies that a tool would need for us to be able to implement it, whether that is form methodologies, navigation, UI, whether that is accessibility, and then the bilingual portion, which they are important to the business, but also for the user to be able to work with that tool. So, and then there are some other areas there, the technological requirements, whether the tool works well with the infrastructure, because certain third-party tools work and interact differently within the infrastructure, and that can sort of, they can come into play based on the magnitude of a solution, which is another point. What some solutions can work very well on a smaller volume, but when you're building something that is bigger, that's when we have to take into account that whichever third-party tool, or whether it's something that we build ourselves, has to sort of meet the criteria of. And then in the end, there are also the government requirements, those being sort of, it has to meet government standards for it to be a tool that we can choose. And there's a few things in there, whether that's security or information policy and other areas. So once we've looked at all of those areas, that's when we sort of go into the next steps and start looking at what tool fits those criteria best. And at the end of the day, it's meant to be a very transparent process, and it's pretty much a science for us at the end of the day. Like a tool either meets or doesn't meet its need, and at the end of the day, certain tools may meet certain needs better based on those kind of categories of requirements.
And Evie, do you then go out to industry and kind of gather information from prospective organizations that you feel meet that need, and kind of have a give and take, back and forth discussion, either through an RFI engagement, through procurement, or other means to kind of suss out, this tool will get us, 80-90% of the way there, but it's missing these key functionalities? And is that okay from a department standpoint, going back to the business lines and identifying, what are those mandatory components? What are those, nice to have features and functionalities that, we're okay not to have, but these 3 ones, whether it's accessibility or security or something else, need to be present in this solution?
Yes, so I sit more at the beginning, I guess, which is kind of processing those requirements and sort of coming up with that ideal solution, and then what technical requirements the third-party tool has to meet. But after, yes, it does go through different processes of determining which tool does meets its best. And there's so much criteria that it has to do, that even if we, let's say, have the perfect tool, it might miss one of the criteria that will make it like valid, because there's just a lot that the government has to kind of go through to pass on one of those tools. Like security, for example, is a good example. While a tool might be the best tool at doing something, if the tool may be deemed not secure, then it would not pass our criteria to be able to go forward. So we have to look at other technologies. So we are involved with some of that process, but there's also other departments that are involved later down the line to ensure that it's a transparent and the best tool gets chosen at the end of the day.
And I assume right now, given you're on the technical side, you're on kind of the front piece of that, the RCMP again is moving into the cloud environment. They're changing a lot of their technology stack. adopting the cloud, you're probably, I would assume, quite busy looking at your existing, legacy on-prem applications, whether they're custom or third-party tools or out-of-the-box functionalities, and mapping them out to the cloud environments, whether it's M365 or the Azure stack or whatever it is, third-party tools, and identifying whether these systems can migrate, can move to the cloud, or if we need to make a change in process. How do you go about kind of evaluating whether the tools that you have today will meet what you need in the future?
Definitely, while I've been a part of migrations in the past and changing tools and changing the way that we do things, definitely on-premise to cloud is quite a big leap. Almost the entire game changes, because in the cloud now you're not really just dealing with one infrastructure or separated infrastructures. You're dealing with it's just a completely different foundation. And when your entire foundation changes, definitely we have to do a lot of review for everything and take into account that when it comes to on-premise and cloud, a lot of the things do have to be rebuilt, but it's a good thing as well because we get a chance to review everything. But definitely the landscape for those two is not, it's very, very different. So yeah, we are busy in trying to determine whether the cloud can meet those criteria of some of the solutions we build, which we build. We classify them in multiple different levels, from like low impact out of the box, which they can definitely be easy to transfer, but even the more high impact ones, which have more customizations that leverage different third-party tools, scripts, and other components. So yes, definitely, it is a game changer.
Sure. And I'll quickly pass it over to you, Alex. Is there anything you'd like to add from an ESDC component or a standpoint? Obviously, as you spoke about, you were an older style department, a lot of legacy components, a lot of legacy solutions. That same kind of mentality of, will what we have today suffice for tomorrow? Do we need to make a change in provider and third-party tool, or again, how we look at our product stack, our technology stack in M365? Is there anything you want to add from an ESDC perspective?
I'd say what we're doing is very comparable. I think to your point about the department being around for a while, we have a comprehensive, I'll call it technology stack, or we call it our technology bricks. So basically, we already have a catalog of what tools we have in our environment and what they can be used for. And so there's a process by which anytime there's a new tool, it gets compared to what's in our catalog. But what's coming out mostly is because a lot of the solutions that we had there are not cloud enabled, right? So the new thing today is that a lot of users are coming to us with cloud solutions, hoping for them to be added as a standard going forward because it meets certain their requirements that the on-prem solution no longer does, either because sometimes the cloud product is more evolved. Even it could be the same product, but just more evolved on the online platform. So we find that we not struggle, but we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions around that. And I found that the same thing, like a lot of rigor of, well, is this requirement that you need really met by the cloud version only? Yes, then let's invest in going towards that direction.
Awesome. And I think obviously that opens up a whole other conversation on the cloud security role that plays in the federal government and what that means, the different procurement vehicles that are available to departments to leverage, how they can use them from a legacy, on-prem style component solution to the new cloud-enabled vehicles that take into account security and CSP assessments and all of that sort of thing. So I know there have been some questions in the chat around that, so I am actually going to pass it back over to Eric so that he can kind of ask some of those questions and have Alex and Evie answer some of those on your behalf. So I do want to say thank you to the both of you for having me here. Eric, Dylan, obviously everyone behind the scenes that work tirelessly to put these M365 Council meetings on. A big shout out to you guys. And thank you for having me to kind of moderate this panel and ask those questions of the two of you. So thank you so much. And Eric, I will pass it back to you so we can get through some of those questions that we've had posted in the chat.
Thank you, Lachlan. I appreciate the panel and the perspectives you guys bring. We got some great questions here in the chat, some comments, some questions, a little bit of mix of both. Some hot topics that are sort of swirling around the tech community right now. Two are sort of in the same vein. Mike Wright, thanks for posting that link. As some of you may know, Microsoft Build happened back on the 23rd, and that it was essentially a big AI showcase for Microsoft. So Mike, thanks for putting that in the chat. And Michael Salmon asked, with Microsoft Build wrapping up in Seattle and the announcements of how productivity will change with features like Copilot, for those who are not familiar, Copilot has been announced essentially as AI embedded into Windows 11. And so Copilot is essentially a companion as you work or do what you do on your computer in Windows 11 that essentially, fills in gaps for you or helps you, complete what you need to complete. So that's sort of what Copilot is. It's going to be baked into Windows 11. Might there be a future session here showing what the roadmap might look like for GC departments and agencies? And I guess my question, Alex, I'll start with you. We had a nice little chat about AI before we even came on. Is AI consideration for the department right now? I know we're still working through so much on the IM side, and AI is new, it's exciting, it's fresh. What are some of the rumblings that you've heard on the AI side at ESDC in particular?
Yeah, so from an AI perspective, I mean, there's obviously, general AIs and purpose AIs, and where from a department like ESDC, a lot of our work is meant to address people that are on the fringe, right? Or the exceptions, people that are sometimes homeless and need assistance. And what we've found is that the AI is sometimes not calibrated to be able to look at the exceptions and more look at the generalities and make assumptions from there. So a big concern for us is that idea of the bias inside of AI. We wouldn't want a specific group to be excluded because they're new or they're very infrequently represented when that's what our department tends to focus on. So I'm not saying that AI couldn't get there one day, but right now what we're seeing is the general AIs are probably not at the level that we would need to do those kinds of things. We internally have looked at different AI tools for auto classification in the IM space, and works really great, but we all fed it information about doing briefing notes. Now everything looks like a briefing note, right? So we saw how quickly we could influence and maybe impact its bias inadvertently. So I think Copilot is a great opportunity. It'll still need to be tested and see how much it needs to learn about you to really be efficient in your day-to-day.
Thanks, Alex. And something that came to mind to me, and Evie, maybe you could touch on this, is the security component of AI, right? Because you have to feed it information in order for it to get better. And if you're feeding it, secure information, what does that look like? So Evie, can you comment on AI at all on the RCMP side and sort of what you've seen or heard there?
In terms of like us, at least in federal policing, when it comes to that, definitely it's not something that's in the highlight yet. There's a lot of modernization that still need to happen to lay a strong foundation when it comes to developing solutions. So at the end of the day, I think AI, while it can have a lot of benefits, right now it'll be very sort of for specific use cases. I definitely see a benefit in it when it comes to training, or when you have an interface guiding you. You can ask it question and it can perhaps provide you things. I see a benefit in it when it comes to translation, which certain tools already offer. And I definitely do see some other like benefits of it making certain more repetitive tasks happen quicker. So it allows us and gives us the time to sort of like be able to work on more things. So we've seen AI has been around for quite a bit when it comes to at least like the M365 landscape that we've seen. Like we've seen it do translations of whole documents, which is absolute, or dictate what language a document is, which definitely has a lot of benefits when it comes to our kind of functionality. Like we do deal with international components quite a bit. And we've seen it develop workflows, although those workflows, are for simple things. So definitely there's a lot of little benefits, but our focus right now is still that foundation piece. So AI will definitely benefit that at some point, but it's definitely not something that's there yet for us.
Great, thanks, Evie. And I know, Michael, the question you asked is, will there be a future session showing what the roadmap might look like? And I think we will. Listening to and seeing what's going on and listening to feedback, I think that's something that we would absolutely consider from a council perspective. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background too on sort of an AI discussion, and just saw a question pop in as well. A. Smith, I don't know if that's your real name. Smith's the common last name, regardless. Copilot baked into Windows 11, add-on feature with an added cost. I am not an expert in what is going to be a SKU, what's going to cost money. When I said baked into, I meant from a pure functionality standpoint, it's integrated into the Windows experience. I don't know how it's going to be sold, not sold. I just meant purely from, you using your computer, it's going to be baked in, similar to how Cortana was. That's what I meant. So I don't know if it's gonna, I don't know what the licensing arrangement's going to be. That's sort of what I meant by that. Shifting gears a little bit, had a great question from Sunny. Sunny asked, Alex, I'm going to direct this towards you. Where does GC Docs fit in now that most departments are using M365, right? Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive. I just want to get your thoughts on that landscape.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and one that ESDC struggled with before going to SharePoint Online or M365. Just prior to the pandemic, we were about to embark on a large GC Doc implementation, and M365 came out with, or was accelerated out because of the pandemic. What we did as analysis back then is what we've seen is the user experience. I'll say maybe a year ago. I can't say that the latest versions of the integrations that OpenText has offered with Teams, but the user experience was much more intuitive on the M365 platform than it was on GC Docs from a collaboration perspective. Editing documents at the same time, being able to see who's changing what, all those kinds of things, being able to share it in the chat, all that functionality really made the work around creating documents a lot more pleasant for users and users. GC Docs was still very, I'll say, rigid in how it handled it. So what tends to happen, and what we've seen departments do, and I'm saying this because of my connection to this project and from the beginning, is that GC Docs have kind of become the archive. So what we're seeing is some people will say, well, the working copies and everything we work on every day, or the live version is on SharePoint, and then when it's approved or becomes an IRBV or an IBV, an information of business value, it gets moved into GC Docs as kind of its final resting place until retention and disposition can be applied to it. So that's what we've seen with people who have it. Not everyone's doing that, but that's a common direction. I think, the one maybe not remaining hurdle for Microsoft, but it was that the E5 licenses are really what you need if you want to do proper retention and disposition and information management. So some departments who did not get an E5 licenses have a bit of a remaining dependency on GC Docs to really do that retention and disposition. So it's traveling between those two licenses and really kind of putting GC Docs as the archive server.
Great, thanks, Alex. And you mentioned in your comment the end user. right? The end user experience, which I think is becoming more and more paramount. And I think M365 is a little easier for the end user to experience creating, storing, sharing documents. So keeping that in mind. And Evie, I want to know if you sort of had any comments on where GC Docs fits in. You know, I know your experience is RCMP, but how does that sort of fit into your experience and what you're seeing with M365?
That is outside of my area generally, but yeah. But the only thing I can say from our end, like when looking at the M365, definitely it's done some changes that are leading to like they seem to have been investing in that area from a technical side. Now, which one is better? I haven't done that analysis myself to be able to talk about which would be kind of like better for whether the end user or from a business perspective. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, I knew that was kind of out of your purview, but I figured I'd give you a crack anyways. So our next question, again, this is a big concern when it comes to third-party software, and we had a question here. It is anonymous, but I know that anonymous speaks for, I'm sure, many people on the line here. How do you work with your security team to allow these third-party applications? At our department, we are very strict with what we can use, and I'm sure, Alex, you're very strict with what you can use as well. That's not an uncommon thing. So if you can comment on some of the security components of what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you indicated, like we store and manage and work with a lot of citizen data, right? Personal information like social security number, bank accounts. So we are very much conscious of the fact that, you know, we do not want to be responsible for a breach of that data, and we want to mitigate those situations as much as possible. It's hard, but we have been able to create some rapid, or say, preliminary analysis of third-party tools security. So we have these, I'll say, like these rapid key points that we need to look at a tool when it gets put forward to figure out, like, is this an absolute no-no, or is it something that's worth investing? And I think that has really helped in making sure that with our security team, we work with them from the get-go, and they have ability to put input. So for example, you know, anything that's not in Canada, well, right away, you know, Patriot Act and all those kinds of things jump in. So by doing those quick analysis, saying, well, does this company have servers in Canada, we're able to work with our security and say, okay, you're right, like this one is probably not the right investment at this point in time. So having these kind of interim analysis is what has helped us to kind of focus on the ones that have a true ability to be brought into the department. It does require an SANA. We do have a dedicated team that sit down with the vendor, ask questions. But what we've found is most vendors are, you know, willing to have that conversation and are open to it, and most have been ready to even make changes to their products so that we could work with them. You'll always have, I won't say the paranoid, because that's maybe a more of a harsh term, but the people that are concerned of or have very realistic scenarios but a low likelihood of happening, we need to be able to address those. And those are the kinds of things that we presented to our CIO to say, well, here's the risks that we see from a business perspective and an IT perspective. And I found that having those conversations early on have allowed us to get certain products in that maybe in the past of the waterfall approach or build it all and then wait for them to evaluate it wouldn't go through. So a little work ahead makes it a lot easier for us to get these tools through our IT security team.
Awesome, thanks. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate your insight there. Evie, can you comment on sort of your security team department and third-party applications? RCMP also being extremely conscious of security.
Yeah, definitely security is sort of like one of those for us, we're trying, like, for me, when trying to achieve like sort of like our ideal system, definitely it's very restrictive, because you have all of these other layers of criteria now that you have to fulfill, and security is a very big portion. It's from like the information area, but it's also from other areas like the technical side, whether like a tool can be a malware, or knowing where it's coming from, or whether like it's trying to connect externally. On-premise was definitely initially sort of like on-premise was definitely a different world than the cloud. That's what we've seen, where in on-premise, like, you can do things globally and to try and secure an application, and you know whether it's trying to connect externally or not. So at least you've removed one component on it. While in the cloud, there's more questions about where is the data center located with, which has made it a completely different game when it comes to sort of looking at different third parties. But yeah, so when it comes to all of that, security is an important factor, whether it is where the third party is coming from, whether it is what kind of authentication it is. Like it's just definitely a big world there. So, but the other component is the tools that, like, there are certain tools that offer more options when it comes to security than not. Even every tool can be definitely can fail at the security portion if not configured properly. So there are certain tools that allow some of that, some that aren't. But even if there's a tool that we found in the past that is secure, there's certain components that we still needed to look at from a practical perspective to make sure that it wasn't performing something that could break a security policy. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Evie. Appreciate your insight. Data sovereignty is number one, right? If it's not in Canada, it's a non-starter. Like, it's just, there's not even a discussion worth having. But there's so much that happens after it's in Canada. It's like, okay, it's in Canada. That is step one, right? That is the gate. Data sovereignty is the gatekeeper into security. So thank you. Appreciate your insight there. And I'll ask a quick question here, and we're sort of veering a little bit into the IM space, right? But I'll ask Sunny's question regardless here. This sort of has an IM slant. Alex, with GC Docs and M365, you still have two systems, right? One doing the archiving and one for the working. How does search and search results work from an end user experience when you have both systems in your organization?
Oh yeah, that's not an easy one. So basically, I know that in our organization, what happens is that there's a stub left behind when things would move to GC Docs. That's where we were going. So the approach was that SharePoint is still the place you'd go and do your search. And now through M365, you know, when you do a search from just like office.com, you get like lots of results. So what the plan was, again, we didn't head down this path, but the plan was to leave the stubs in there. So basically, as part of the integration tool that existed, and I think it's still available now, between OpenText and M365 or SharePoint, you would be able to say this document can go to archive, and that would be where it would go into SharePoint Online and leave a stub behind with some clear metadata, such as the name, the title, person who last edited. So at least that way you could still have just one area of search. That's, you know, kind of the cheap, not the cheap way, but one way of addressing it. Ultimately, the other approach would be having like a enterprise search, but then you get into a whole bunch of other concerns like network drive searching and e-discovery and all those kinds of things. So it is not an easy solution, but it was the one that was better that's had a higher level of acceptance from our user community. People, well, you know, and for anybody that's a big OpenText fan here, like no slight to them, but the interface was not something that made it user friendly. It was OpenText is a retention and disposition tool, not so much a collaboration tool. And people are using in the workplace documents to collaborate. It's no longer write a few paragraphs, send me the attachment, and then I'll write the rest. It's let's write it together. Let's go on a call together. Let's see the document and change it. GC Docs was not playing in that space, and that's why it being the M365 being the portal or the front end is what was being preferred by our users. So we kind of went with what will get best accepted.
Awesome, thanks, Alex. And we have 5 minutes left here. I wonder if we can get one more question in. I'm gonna flush one more question in here. Evie, how can you secure buy-in from high-level stakeholders to purchase that third-party tool? So you've evaluated it, you really like it, but you have to go, obviously, to get budget for it, you got to buy it. So how do you get that stakeholder approval at the next level when you go up and now you want to purchase it?
This is where in the government, definitely there are very specific processes when it comes to how a tool gets vetted and whatnot, to ensure mainly that it's done in a transparent way, especially that depending on dollar value. So I sit more on the kind of this is what we need part. So I'm a little bit more separated from that portion. But once we have something, once our main kind of, I guess, goal is to make sure that all the criteria is there and there's nothing that's really missing when it does go to the next level, and then a tool gets researched. And we have different areas in the agency that deal with those, with selecting which tool would be proper. So
thanks, Evie. Alex, do you want to comment a little bit on that next level buy-in?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on what the next level is. What we found has worked well is if we can show the value proposition directly to the executive. So one that was easier to do was a tool that would help them manage their inbox and their admins manage their inbox. It wasn't hard to come up with a use case about how having this tool would save them challenges of it's 8 o'clock, their admin is not around, they need to respond to an urgent email, they can't find the file, how do they get to it? So best way I found is to tie back the functionality to a story that applies to them. It's not always easy when you're doing back-end tools that are, network switches or, network monitoring things. It's not always easy, but I think that's your easiest way to get their attention and for them to relate to it directly. I think that will help you grease the wheels to all the process that Evie was mentioning that you still have to go through, right? But if you get that grease on those wheels, it kind of does remove a lot of the headaches.
Awesome, thanks, Alex. I will share just a quick comment that was shared here in the Q&A. I made sort of a black and white comment when in reality, I guess it's a little more gray than maybe I had assumed. Data residency requirements are not exactly black and white. Departments, CSOs, DSOs can assume residual risk by allowing data outside Canadian geographies if it is a business need for them. So turns out something I thought was black and white is a little bit of gray. And you know what, we're all learning here. So I appreciate that, opportunity for everyone to get some lessons learned here as well. So thank you for that comment. We are going to conclude here. We got 1 minute left. I'm going to conclude. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Our next council meeting will be in person. We'll be getting invitations out shortly within the next week or so. And if you have a question we didn't get to, feel free to suggest topics for future meetings. We did discuss today AI. That might be a future topic at another meeting. So I would like to thank Alex and Evie for joining us. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot a little bit. I appreciate that. You guys fought valiantly, so thank you for joining us today. And Lachlan, of course, the president of Orangutech, thanks for joining us and hosting that panel. So I appreciate that. Thank you everyone for attending our council. I look forward to seeing you all in person in September. I will see you all then. Thanks. Have a great afternoon. Bye.